Welcome back into the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I am Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy Rocky Magana, Kramer Sansone in the background, helping us keep this operation afloat. Rocky, it was a weird game. It was an ugly game that we will absolutely get into. But the most important thing, Kansas City Chiefs walk away Monday Night Football at Arrowhead Stadium with the victory. 30-29 over the Las Vegas Raiders, and they improved to 4-1 on the season. The Raiders fall to 1-4. I was questioning myself all day long, thinking like I had too much faith in the Chiefs dominating this game, and like there was too many things that like I was questionable about, and wondering whether I was too over the top on board with the Kansas City Chiefs just dominating this football game. And it played out exactly the way my fears were creeping in all day long ahead of Monday Night Football. But it worked out. The Chiefs won in really an entertaining game that was kind of is going to wind up having an asterisk because of some officiating calls and some bogus decisions by the NFL referees that continue to be absolutely atrocious this season.
Oh my gosh. The NFL has to get this right. That was hands down the worst call I've ever seen. That was worse than Derek Johnson against the Titans in the playoffs. One question, Steven. How can you rough the passer if you're the ball carrier and the passer is then on defense? If you're the ball carrier, it is physically impossible for you to rough the passer. He stripped the ball, had it in his arms by the time he ever even landed on him, not to mention he braced his fall. That was the most garbage call I've ever seen in my life. The NFL has overcorrected once again, and the referees have got to, the NFL and the referees have to figure this out. The issue with I know that they implemented the new rules to protect the quarterback because of what happened with Tua. What happened with Tua, the problem wasn't with the plays themselves. The problem was with how the teams in the NFL handled the injuries. This is the most garbage thing I've ever seen. It shouldn't have been this close of a game. This is at least 3 points right here at the end of the half. The refs were horrible on both sides today. They were just complete. It was a train wreck. One of the worst officiated games I've seen in a long time.
So this is where we have to start. And I want to dive into the nuts and bolts of this game because it did wind up being like a really entertaining Monday Night Football game. And it's something that's been plaguing the NFL this season. Like there's been a lot of trash primetime games, and the Chiefs Raiders rivalry, Monday Night Football at Arrowhead Stadium, like it wound up being a really entertaining and fun football game to watch. But this play call, man, it's what we are seeing is the NFL and all of these teams across the league suffering the consequences of the Miami Dolphins making a poor decision and totally disregarding concussion protocols and trotting their quarterback back out there when we all knew that he clearly had a concussion, right? Like that's the issue that we're seeing across the league right now. And we saw it happen yesterday in the Tampa Bay and Atlanta Falcons game where Grady Jarrett had as clean a sack as you're ever going to see on Tom Brady. And it was a game-changing penalty call for no reason. And, to put it simply, the Raiders were absolutely dominating the Chiefs early in this game. Like, there's no way of talking yourself out of that. They were dominating the Chiefs along the defensive line. The Chiefs offensive line was totally overmatched early in this game. They were putting pressure on Mahomes on every single drop back. And it was a dominant performance by them early in the game. And the Chiefs defense wasn't getting pressure on Derek Carr going against this offensive line that we know is just not very good, that has struggled to keep Carr protected all season long. And this was the game-changing play, right? And it wound up being pretty game-changing, but not game-changing in the way that it should have been, because this is a third down. Huge play in the game. Chiefs trying to grab some momentum right before the half, get the ball back just after scoring their first touchdown in the game, and they could have gone back and tried to score again before the half to try to get this thing closer. Chris Jones does everything that you're supposed to do when you're paying a defensive lineman as much money as he's making to sack quarterbacks. He sacks the quarterback, not only takes the football away from Derek Carr, but recovers it himself and creates a game-changing turnover that is then called roughing the passer. And again, we're seeing the consequences of the Miami Dolphins mismanagement spread across the league right now, where we're going to see some major developments, I think, here in the coming weeks for these rules and the way that this thing is being handled. We've already seen it with the concussion protocols, but this just simply can't stand. Like, I am all for player safety, but that is a game changing play, especially for the NFL, a league where you're in bed with all the gambling books now. You're investing in them, you're partnering with all of them, you're advertising them all over the place. You can't have the referees changing games like this, because this was a game changing play for the Kansas City Chiefs that wound up going in favor of the Raiders. And I don't really know what else Chris Jones could have done here. You can see him on the replay in the background right now. Like, he puts his arm down to try to brace from the fall to totally, collapse all of his weight onto Derek Carr. There's nothing you can ask a defensive player to do who's going 90 miles per hour to hit a quarterback, because that's what he's getting paid millions of dollars to do. There's nothing else you can ask Chris Jones to do in that moment than what he did, and he still drew a penalty somehow.
You have a human elephant who has another human elephant trying to stop him from getting to a guy. And then you have him hitting that guy full force and trying to slow himself down. And not to mention, he has the ball by the time he touches the ground. You can't rough a guy if he's not on offense. And the second that there's a change of possession, you're no longer on offense. I mean, the problem with this is the NFL they have to take action. They have to take it immediately, is because this is affecting the competition of the games and the idea of fair play, of where the best team wins. It's not that these defensive players are going out and trying to, clothesline a quarterback or, take out their knees, none of the stuff we used to see like 10 years ago. This is clean, fair play that is getting overturned and is affecting the fair play competition of football and calling into question the integrity of the game. I mean, the NFL is all about protecting the shield and all about protecting the integrity of the game. Their integrity is in shambles right now from an aspect of rushing the passer. There is no consistency. There's like, players don't know what they can or cannot do. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you see defensive tackles start to pick up quarterbacks, hold them like a baby, rock them a couple of times, and then gently lay them in the turf like they were their mother. I mean, this is asinine. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life.
It is unbelievably stupid. Like, again, I am all about player safety. What the Dolphins did was absolute unbelievable mismanagement of a player that is supposed to be like their franchise cornerstone, into Tua Tagovailoa, and allowing him to re-enter that game. And then now we've got all this stuff coming out this week about the way they mismanage it, and their team doctors are taking the full blame for all of it. But like, I don't believe for a second that the Miami Dolphins, like, there wasn't some pressure from somebody in that organization to get Tua back in that football game. And now we're seeing the consequence of that across the entire NFL. But like I was saying, this was still, in a way, a game-changing play for the Kansas City Chiefs, because Rocky, man, that Arrowhead crowd, I have never seen a live NFL audience change a game like that. Like, I have never seen the live NFL crowd at an NFL game change the game and impact the game in the way that Arrowhead crowd did tonight after that call. Everybody was screaming. Everybody was roaring at Arrowhead Stadium. It was, if they had the Guinness Book of World Records there tonight, I think they would have set another record for being the loudest stadium in the NFL, because but it would have been with boos, and it would have been with trash talking the referees. And I actually kind of felt bad for Carl Jeffers at one point when he comes on the mic and his voice is cracking and he's clearly just terrified to make the wrong call, because this crowd of 70 plus thousand people is totally turned on him. It wound up still being the spark that the Chiefs needed. Like, it wound up still being the game-changing play, even though it was such a bogus call. I've never seen anything like it in an NFL game before.
Oh my gosh. I was watching the game with my friend here at the house. And after that call, when I heard the boos come down, I looked at him and I said, the refs are terrified. They're scared to make the wrong call at this point, because if they make another terrible call like that, there might be some fans that rush the field at this point. Like Arrowhead was angry, at that call, and rightfully so. No, obviously we would never condone any fans ever do anything like that, but at the same time, like you could tell that that the referees felt the palpable anger of the crowd. And I think it affected the way they called the rest of the game. I mean, you saw them come out right after halftime and they huddled together, right? To make sure that they got the call right. They actually ended up getting the call wrong, but it benefited us. So, I'm not going to argue too much about it. I feel like they owed us one. But at the end of the day, hats off to you, Chiefs Kingdom, and all the fans at Arrowhead. You guys brought it. You made them feel uncomfortable. You made the opposing team feel uncomfortable. You made the referees feel uncomfortable when they didn't do their job. And you brought the heat. You brought the anger, and it was impressive. And we are very proud of you.
So it was the wake up call that they absolutely needed. You know, it didn't come the way that you normally expect to get it, but it worked out in an incredible way because they finally turned it on, and you saw everybody on that Chiefs sideline get pissed off, and you saw how upset everybody was about that call. And it wound up being the game changing play, even though it didn't actually go on the stat sheet as a sack and forced fumble for Chris Jones. Like,
oh my gosh, did you see Andy Reid? I've never seen Andy Reid that angry in my life. I looked at my friend and I said, "Did Andy Reid drink a Diet Coke today? Because he is feisty over there."
That was the next thing that I wanted to mention was, Andy Reid. It was being reported from everybody at Arrowhead covering the game. Our guy Pete Sweeney, who's there on the ground right now covering the post game. It was reported that like Andy Reid, once they went into the halftime locker room, and by the way, Matthew Wright, we'll get to him in a little bit. I know he struggled, but him drilling that 59-yard field goal right before half, like he deserves some credit for that. But Andy Reid, before he heads to the locker room, heads to the tunnel after, the clock winds down to 0 in the first half. Andy Reid still stuck around and was just jawing with the referees. And Andy Reid's not that kind of guy. Like there's some coaches in the NFL that you expect that from. Andy Reid's usually not that guy. Like Andy Reid will get on you a little bit, and we've seen him get mad before. I've never seen Andy Reid as mad as he was after that call, just to illustrate how absurd it was and how ridiculous it was. And then for that to even extend at the halftime break where Andy Reid's like, "No, I'm not letting that go. I'm going to stop you right now, and you're going to talk to me." And then the Arrowhead crowd just carried that energy into the second half, man. It was unbelievable. It's one of the games where I regret not being there. I regret not being at Arrowhead Stadium tonight because I have never seen a crowd impact a game in the way that they did tonight. And you could feel it coming through your television for everybody that's just sitting around watching it at home. It was unbelievable. Like it was an incredible performance from the Arrowhead crowd tonight for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, it was bar none one of the top 3 like Arrowhead crowd moments. I think, one of them being when John Elway had back-to-back, delay games because he couldn't hear the play call, and the referees come over the announcer and tell the crowd to please quiet down so John Elway can hear the play. That's in the top 3, but this by far, this probably even tops that because of the consistency and the length of time of the sound and the noise. And at home on the TV, you could just hear it reverberating through the TV screen. And anytime the referee turned on the microphone, you just heard a rain of boos pour down. And yeah, I mean, but it's a perfect point. Like Andy Reid is not that guy. And for Andy Reid to get to that point, then you know that it has to be complete and total BS.
So there's a clip going around on Twitter right now, and I want to make sure to mention it because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be talking about it. But Davante Adams, when he was walking off the field after this game, clearly frustrated after the Raiders lose, shoved like a sideline worker. It looks like he's holding some kind of mic or a camera person, somebody who's probably a part of the television crew just trying to do his job. Davante Adams just unpromptly shoves him because he walks into his way. I just think that illustrates how ugly this game was also getting on the field and how nasty this was, and how, we had some conversations this week about like, does this rivalry really have any juice anymore? Like Mahomes just owns the Raiders and he just dominates them. And, Devontae Adams is a guy that went to Las Vegas to win, and they had high expectations for this season. Now through 5 weeks, they're sitting at 1-4, and they just had a brutal loss to the Kansas City Chiefs where they were up early in the game, and Devontae Adams had a huge game. So I understand why he's upset. You certainly can't do that, but that kind of illustrates the temperament that we were seeing from the players too on the field. Like, we saw Max Crosby was getting after Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes, who is not normally a trash talker, like we see him having fun and kind of, cracking jokes and doing that stuff. Patrick Mahomes is not usually the guy that's like, come fight me on the sideline, like come find me on the sideline. And we saw him doing that tonight to Max Crosby in this Raiders defense. Like, it could have gotten a little bit uglier on the field tonight than it actually did, but there was a lot of trash talk. There was a lot of jawing going on during this game. And I think that just further illustrates, like, the Arrowhead crowd, just that penalty call, like there was frustration on both sides of the ball. And I mean, it made for an entertaining football game. I'll say that.
Well, yeah, and I think that there was a couple of things that played into it. Was like a perfect storm with the Chiefs coming out flat. There was a lot of almost like a sense of dread early in the game of, oh God, here's Indianapolis all over again. The teams can't come out starting slow. They got to turn it on, and then they turn it on and they get a game-changing play, and the refs just snatch it away from you. And at that point, it was just like the ultimate frustration just pouring over on all parties, because the Raiders are all fired up because they think that they're going to come into Arrowhead and finally get a victory. And then the Chiefs are mad because they didn't come out and perform how they wanted to right off the bat. And then the fans, of course, are watching this whole thing, and they were expecting a nice, fun night at Arrowhead of Patrick Mahomes stomping on the Raiders like they deserve and like we're accustomed to. And, the one question I have about the Max Crosby and Patrick Mahomes interaction, though, is what did Max Crosby say? Was it worse than what Chris Jones said? And if not, then why didn't Max Crosby get a flag for getting in the face of a quarterback? There were multiple times that Patrick Mahomes was hit pretty hard after the throw today, and we didn't get a single roughing the passer call. And it seems to be a tendency in the league that there is no consistency, that certain quarterbacks are protected more than other quarterbacks based on the style they're playing. It seems like players who use their legs to extend plays don't get the same protection that other quarterbacks who don't have that capability do. And it's not fair, and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and it's a problem across the league. Some of this stuff isn't going to get addressed until the offseason when they go to these owners' meetings and vote on these rule changes and things like that. But I would not be shocked if we get an in-season, some kind of update to this roughing the passer call, especially with the way that they hurried up and changed the NFL concussion protocol. It's like they can do that in certain circumstances. But let's actually get into the game. Let's actually get into the things that we saw from the Kansas City Chiefs tonight, the good and the bad, because there was plenty of all of it on both sides of the ball. And we already mentioned how much they were struggling early on in the football game, and the defense was struggling too. But the highlight offensively for the Kansas City Chiefs tonight is Travis Kelce. First 3-touchdown game of his NFL career. Also tacked on another one. So first 4-touchdown game of Travis Kelce's career, which I believe was a record for most touchdown passes caught by a tight end in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform. Weird stat line, 7 receptions, 25 yards, 4 touchdowns, but you'll absolutely take it. His role in the red zone this season has been, I think, one of the more surprising things, just because it's not necessarily always been Travis Kelce's thing. Like, he's never always been that guy that Mahomes looks for in the red zone for the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think it highlights some of the worries that we probably have about this wide receiver group, that they know Mahomes just knows, I got to go to my Hall of Famer. We get inside the 20, we get inside the 10. I got to go to my Hall of Famer because I don't necessarily trust all these other guys.
Well, and it wasn't just the most tight ends by a Chiefs tight end, in the history of football. That's the most touchdowns by a tight end in a football game in the NFL since 1985, when Jimmy Giles, caught 4 touchdowns, for Tampa Bay. And it's the second most in the history of the NFL. There's only 3 guys besides Kelce who have caught 4 touchdowns in a game or more. And Kella Winslow Sr. has the record with 5 that he did back in 1981. And then it's Giles, and then Mike Ditka is the other guy who did it. And other than that, this is one of the greatest touchdown performances by a tight end in the history of the NFL. Yeah, the yards weren't there, but I mean, that's okay, man. You pay tight ends to score touchdowns, and Kelce and Mahomes in the red zone, they were locked in and they were determined, and I think they were angry and they were mad. And I think especially Kelce, when with the Indianapolis game when they lost, he kind of really wore that one on his shoulders. And I think that now that anytime he's in the end zone, especially in a game where they're down, or in the red zone, I think that he is like a man on fire. Like there's no way you're going to keep him out of the end zone, or he's not going to make the play if given the opportunity, which is going to bode well for the Chiefs moving forward. It means that there's going to be a lot more touchdowns for Travis Kelce this season.
So that was the good tonight. And yeah, Travis Kelce was incredible. Didn't have a huge yardage total, but came up huge in every moment where the Chiefs absolutely needed it. Travis Kelce was there for Patrick Mahomes. So hats off to Travis Kelce. He put on a show tonight for the Kansas City Chiefs. But I do think it again highlights some of the worries about this wide receiver group. And I know Marquez Valdez-Scantling had an impressive game tonight. It was by far his biggest performance as a Kansas City Chief. Mecole Hardman had some nice plays and some big plays down the stretch for them. He's still clearly battling through that heel injury that's been bothering him for a few weeks now. And he came up slow on a couple of plays, had to go to the sideline, get worked on for a second, and then came back into the football game. He had a couple of big plays, but at the end of the game where it's 3rd and 3, you have a chance to try to get a first down and try to, put yourself in a position to seal this football game up by 1 point after the Raiders chose to go for 2, which I don't disagree with, despite the criticism that the Raiders are taking right now. Like you go for the win when you can, because you don't know if you're going to get another opportunity to do that. I never disagree with that, despite, my small understanding of analytical football. I will always agree with that approach to the football game, but the Chiefs have an opportunity to try to seal this thing. I don't love the play call to Mecole Hardman. It wasn't a great throw by Patrick Mahomes, but I think this game still further highlighted, despite the fact that you got a good performance from MVS, despite the fact that you got a good performance from Mecole Hardman, man, they still just don't have a reliable wide receiver that you can bank on, that can be that guy in those closing game moments where it's 3rd and 3. I need this dude to be open because I know they're going to put 3 guys on Travis Kelce in this situation because he's always my go-to in these key moments of the game. And we still haven't seen that guy step up. Sky Moore got, worked in a little bit, but it seems like he's still a long way away from being a significant playmaker for this offense. And I'm starting to get worried about the wide receivers. Like I am legitimately starting to feel like their group of pass catchers is a red flag, because I don't feel like they've, through 5 weeks now, even sitting at 4-1, you're getting ready to face one of the best teams in football next week in the Buffalo Bills. And I don't know if the Chiefs have the personnel to truly keep up with a team of that caliber right now on the offensive side of the ball.
No, they don't. I mean, as far as wide receivers go, they don't. Juju made a couple of nice catches today, which was nice to see. MVS and Mahomes for a second straight week. They linked up for a couple of plays, but then you saw MVS let another one go straight through his hands again. And it just seems to be a concentration thing. It's not a skill thing with MVS. It has to be a concentration thing. He just has too many drops. And like you said, and then 3rd and 3, like in what universe, when you're thinking game on the line, 3rd and 3, have to get a first down, I'm throwing the ball to Mecole Hardman. Like that never enters anybody's mind. He's not that guy, and nor should he be. And I feel like he ran the route wrong. When I looked at it, it looked like he cut it off too short. Mahomes was expecting him to stretch it further to the corner, and he kind of cut it underneath. But nonetheless, like he's not reliable like that. Like he's not that guy. He's not the guy who's going to do that. And the Chiefs haven't ever used him in that way. In the past, he's never been that move the chains third down guy. And so the Chiefs have to find that guy because they don't have him right now. And whether it's going to be in through addition or somebody stepping up, we'll have to wait and see. But I mean, the later the season gets, the more crucial having somebody like that's going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's a question we still don't have an answer to, and we'll see as Sky Moore gets more opportunities as the season goes on. Maybe he can be that guy, but this was what I was worried about heading into the season. Travis Kelce is playing as good as he's ever played in his NFL career, but once we start getting down the stretch and you're playing these teams that you're going to see come playoff time, like I don't know who the reliable guy still is out in this group of pass catchers through 5 weeks of the NFL season. And it is concerning for the offense as a whole. But I want to move to the defense. And by the way, if you're in the comments, make sure you use hashtag AP Rapid Reaction Show if you want to get to any observations or questions or whatever. We'll try to get to them at the end of the show. And make sure if you are listening on the podcast that you stick around afterwards. We'll have all the post-game press conferences for you immediately following the show. Andy Reid is speaking with the media right now. And early in the football game, defensive lineman Turk Wharton was carted to the locker room. Andy Reid confirmed at the podium after the game that Turk Wharton did in fact tear his ACL. Unfortunately, his season is over for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a big loss. I think Turk Wharton is a very strong rotational piece along the interior of that defensive line who's shown some flashes for them. And it's a bummer for a young player who was really carving out a role for himself in this unit, but it is along a defensive line where the Chiefs have some depth, but it's something you always hate to see for any player in the NFL. It's really a bummer for a guy who has really shown some improvement so far during his time with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough break. I mean, he's been a productive player for the Chiefs this year. I really like Turk in the run game. And I mean, I don't know, the Chiefs didn't play good run defense today, period. But I mean, they were playing pretty good run defense early on before he went out and got injured. So, I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, they're going to have to find an answer and find a way to fill his snaps, productively. It's just sad because he is a guy who's not ever been a top of the roster guy, who's always kind of fought his way onto this team and kind of earned his bread week in, week out, which is kind of gutty play. And so to see him go out like that, you never like to see a guy like that get hurt, So, hope he heals up fast. We're excited to see him next year.
Yeah, it's an absolute bummer. Wishing Turk Wharton nothing but the best, and hope he gets back and is ready for Chiefs training camp next season and comes back better than ever. Sticking with the defense, I want to highlight something here that we were talking in the Show and BK group chat about during the game. It's actually something that we talked about on this week's show on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. If you haven't listened, you should absolutely go back and check it out. Ron brought up maybe they should just put L'Jarius Sneed on Devontae Adams because we were a little bit worried about the cornerback tandem of Jalen Watson and Rashad Fenton. And listen, you've gotten everything you could ever hope to get out of Jalen Watson this season. I don't care if Jalen Watson gives up touchdowns. He's a rookie 7th-round pick, and the plays that he's made have more than made up for the ones that he hasn't because of his status and where he's coming from in the competition that he is facing right now in the situation that he's been thrust into in this Kansas City Chiefs secondary. But Devontae Adams absolutely shredded the Chiefs. And I think he only wound up with 3 catches in the game, wound up having 3 catches. It's like a Gabriel Davis performance from yesterday where Devontae Adams only had 3 catches. So you'd think, 3 catches, Devontae Adams, that's fine. But it wound up going for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns because he just absolutely smoked you deep down the field. And I'm starting to really worry about this secondary. Rashad Fenton is, I think, a fine NFL cornerback, but Rashad Fenton is a fine NFL cornerback when he's your 3rd cornerback, when he's not the guy that you have to rely on to be out there on an island going against a team's number 1 wide receiver. And Devontae Adams, no matter how you want to rank him, there's a lot of really good wide receivers in the NFL, but Devontae Adams is going to be top 3 on virtually every list you try to make because he's just that damn good. And Rashad Fenton has no business being on an island trying to slow down Devontae Adams. Jalen Watson doesn't either, but to Spag's credit, he did adjust during the game and did put L'Jarius Sneed up on Devontae Adams. And so that's where we saw him kind of go quiet in the middle of the game until he had that late fourth quarter long touchdown pass from Derek Carr that was, a beautiful pass from Derek Carr. But I need to see the Chiefs do more of that because I know Spags loves to put these cornerbacks out on an island. Until they get Trent McDuffie back, they just don't have the personnel for it because Rashad Fenton can't be that guy. He's become a liability for your secondary week in and week out now.
I mean, Rashad Fenton is a slot cornerback. He has no business playing man coverage on the outside, especially against a wide receiver of Devontae Adams' caliber. I mean, to his defense, you're setting him up to fail. That's a battle that he's going to lose every single time. That's a battle that Jalen Watson's going to lose every time. That's a battle that Jalen Ramsey's going to lose 50% of the time. I mean, like the cornerback is one of the hardest positions to play in the NFL because it's so reactionary. And then you put a guy who is not a top flight talent against one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. Yeah, Devontae Adams only had 3 receptions, and he did have 124 yards today, but he also had another 100 yards in penalties that he generated. He was a problem, across the board. And right now, L'Jarius Sneed is hands down your best cornerback. And I know you like to blitz him. I know you like to play him in the slot. I know you like to move him around, but don't overthink it, Spags. Like at some point, put your best player on their best player and then give him help over the top, especially in a game where Hunter Renfrow is not the guy who's going to stretch the field. Mac Hollins is having trouble holding on to the ball, and Darren Waller is out with an injury. Devontae Adams is really all they had in this game. You take him away and you take away their offense and you make them one-dimensional where they just have to count on Brandon Jacobs to run the ball. So why not put your best defensive back on him and then give him help over the top? I mean, it makes no sense. And you talked about L'Jarius Sneed kind of manning Devontae Adams in the middle of the game, and that was awesome until the end of the game. And you took L'Jarius Sneed off of Devontae Adams. No, he got a touchdown, and then he almost won the game.
So I want to talk about that because I think that Spags has actually been really good this season. Like I think Spags has been kind of forced into the situation that he's not normally comfortable in, where he's got to play all these young guys. And we know Spags, similar to Andy, likes to bring them along slow and give them an opportunity to really understand the defense before he really puts a lot on their plate. This season, he didn't really have a chance to do that. Like you got to put the bodies that you have out there and hope for the best. And I think that Spags, for the most part, this season has actually called really good games, has actually been a really good defensive coordinator this year. But you mentioned it, that touchdown to Devontae Adams late in the game, it was Jalen Watson, and it was a right coverage to his credit. Like Brian Cook also was supposed to have the help over the top on Devontae Adams on that play call. I just don't understand why in that situation with the game on the line, you need to stop. Why do you have 2 rookie players on Devontae Adams? Why is Jalen Watson and Brian Cook the 2 that you trust to guard Devontae Adams in that situation? And Adams just blew right past him. And Derek Carr dropped, again, a very, very beautiful pass that wound up going for a touchdown. Like, it just is what it is. But it was like, Seed was doing so well. Why did we do that? Why did we change it up right there, Spags? Like, what was going on?
Like, if it would have been L'Jarius Sneed and Justin Reid on Devontae Adams in that situation, that's the perfect call. Like, you had the right coverage. Like you said, you just had the wrong personnel. Like Spags. Like I think just sometimes he just overthinks it so much, and he's his own worst enemy at times. And football is a complex game, but it's not as complex as sometimes as he makes it. I mean, like there's only a certain number of zones on the football field, and only a certain number of places that a player can go. And that in those situations, Devontae Adams isn't going to be the guy who's running out in the flats. Like they're not ever going to send Devonta Adams out in the flats. They're going to stretch the field with him and try to push the ball downfield. Hunter Renfrow is going to be their underneath guy. So you don't got to worry about Devonta Adams breaking anything off short on you. Okay, so then put your best guy on him and keep him in front of you and go stride for stride with him and limit his damage.
And you mentioned it, and Waller basically getting no run in this game. Like, he left early in the first quarter with a hamstring injury and did not return. So he had no impact on this game at all. And I think that was key in Spags actually making the commitment to move L'Jarius Sneed to Devontae Adams. Because if Waller was still in the game and played a full game for the Raiders, I don't think there's any circumstance where Spags would have done that. I don't think he would have even considered taking L'Jarius Sneed off of Darren Waller because Darren Waller runs so much from the slot. So I don't think that he would have done that. And so it worked in the Chiefs' favor that Waller went down early in the football game and had to leave with that injury, because then Spags was willing to adjust and put Sneed on Devontae Adams, because L'Jarius Sneed is just their best corner right now. Like, it's pretty plain and simple. Like, he is their best playmaking corner. And again, Jalen Watson is giving you a lot, but you're also asking a lot out of a rookie 7th round pick. And I think we had higher expectations for Rashad Fenton after the way that he's played over the last couple of years, but it's pretty clear that Rashad Fenton is a guy who can play well for your defense and can be an impact player when he's not the guy who is tasked with guarding the opposing team's number 1 pass catcher. Like, he is a good cleanup guy who can contain all of the other guys who aren't Devontae Adams. He just can't be that guy who's left alone on an island with Devontae Adams. But man, what a football game. Whatever. Chiefs win, Rocky. Arrowhead was absolutely insane tonight. They walk away with the victory 30-29, improved to 4-1 on the season ahead of next week's absolutely massive AFC showdown against the Buffalo Bills at home. That's going to be another monster game. But we've got a lot of things to get to from you guys and your reactions during the show. Again, if you want to comment before we get out of here, you can. Hashtag AP Rapid Reaction. Chiefs could really use a wide receiver, OBJ. I hope the Chiefs can sign him when he's healthy. It would definitely improve the wide receiver core. I'm not against that. OBJ is kind of doing this whole tour right now where he's just visiting NFL teams and taking his time and deciding, who he wants to sign with and where he wants to go. And he is coming off of an ACL tear that he suffered in the Super Bowl. So I have no idea where he's at in his recovery right now. He was never going to be ready for the start of the regular season, but he could wind up being a guy who's available that signs in the back half of the season with a contender. And when he was with the Rams last season, late in the year, like, he was an impact player for them. He's not the Odell Beckham that, we're used to seeing, where he is a total game-breaking, game-changing wide receiver anymore. He's just not that dude, but he's still a solid NFL wide receiver. And yeah, I mean, the Chiefs don't have a lot of cap space, but if they could find a way to do it late in the season and OBJ is healthy, it's something I would at least take a look at, especially if these wide receivers don't improve anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is at what price, right? You can't sign OBJ past this year. He's a guy with back-to-back, is it back-to-back injuries and back-to-back seasons, and if you give him anything longer than this year, then you're basically looking at Sammy Watkins 2.0, which, even though playoff Sammy was great for 1 year, we kind of paid for it on the back end of that contract. So you can't sign OBJ past this year. And so the question is there going to be another team that's going to overpay to get OBJ on their team? Not necessarily past this year, but just beyond what the Chiefs can afford to pay for this year, where the Chiefs would have to add on an additional year in order to make a competitive offer, right? So I for the right price, sure, but I think that it's a long shot that the Chiefs are able to make it happen. I think Brett Veach would really like to make it happen, though, because I think he's an OBJ fan.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think it just depends on his health and who he's seriously talking to. I don't think he's seriously talking to any team right now. Because I don't know that he's 100% healthy, but he will probably sign somewhere later in the season. I just don't know if the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be able to work something out there. Next question. Not going to lie, Juju has been a big letdown so far this season. I mean, it just depends on what your expectations were for Juju. I know during training camp we were kind of talking him up and kind of falling in love with the training camp hype because the connection he had with Patrick Mahomes. But right now, Juju Smith-Schuster looks like the same guy he has in Pittsburgh the last couple of years. He is a decent chain moving possession wide receiver who just does not have explosion anymore in his game. I don't know if it's an injury thing. I don't know why he was so explosive early on in his career in Pittsburgh, and he just doesn't seem like he is that guy now. But he's always kind of been like an exclusively slot wide receiver, and the Kansas City Chiefs are asking him to do a lot more than that this season. And I just don't think that he's the guy for that. He's just a chain moving possession wide receiver who can make some strong contested catches in traffic here and there, but he's just not a game breaker. And so if you were expecting him to get a game breaker, you were always going to be let down. But I was never really expecting that from Juju Smith Schuster. He's basically what I expected him to be for the most part.
I thought Juju played admirably well, considering that he was coming into this game with a hurt hamstring. I thought he moved pretty well considering his injury. He made some tough catches today. Juju's that guy, like you said, is going to get you 8 to 13 yards across the middle, and he's going to make tough catches, and he's not going to get a lot after the catch. Juju Smith-Schuster right now is kind of like a younger Jarvis Landry, to an extent. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a superstar by any means, and he's not going to be a superstar. And so I think that, maybe some Chiefs fans thought that they were going to get a wide receiver one in Juju Smith-Schuster, and he's not a wide receiver one, in the traditional sense, but he is a solid quality receiving piece, Like you said, though, he's not that explosive guy.
Next question, thoughts on punting on 4th down and giving the Raiders the ball versus our defense that struggled tonight. I don't like it. I'm not surprised. Andy's just not really super aggressive when it comes to that stuff. I will say one thing that I brought up tonight, and we've talked about this a little bit before, Rocky. Andy Reid absolutely drives me crazy before half times because he never uses his timeouts under any circumstance. It doesn't matter what the game situation is. And, after the bogus Chris Jones roughing the passer call and the Raiders drive down and I think they got another field goal out of the series, Andy Reid could have started burning timeouts there to try to conserve a little bit more clock. And I get heat of the moment in the game. You're frustrated and you're annoyed with that, and you're angry that bogus call happened. And and then Patrick Mahomes, they get the ball back. I think there was like 20 seconds left, and thankfully you have Mahomes, and Mahomes got you into field goal range, and Matthew Wright hits that 59-yard field goal, so you feel a little bit better about it going into the break. But that's a huge issue with Andy. It's always been an issue with Andy. He doesn't conserve the clock before halftime to try to get scores, which we saw a couple of weeks ago when Mahomes got frustrated with Eric Bieniemy because they decided to run the ball and run the clock out. Mahomes said, "No, I want to score before half." Like, what are we doing? Like, that's just Andy Reid. Like, he is not going to be a super heavy analytical minded head coach and play caller. He's never been that guy. Like, that's not who he is. He uses it to a certain extent, but Andy Reid is one of the most creative offensive play callers that we've ever seen. So more often than not, he's going to trust his intuition over the analytics. And so I don't blame him for that. He's had a lot of success doing it, but it pops up every now and then where Andy gets a little bit too conservative. And thankfully it just didn't bite the Chiefs tonight because it could have seriously cost them the game.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing that really, it really gets on my nerves about Andy Reid beyond the not using his timeouts and letting the clock run down is he's one of the most creative play callers in the world until it's 3rd and short. And then he seems to just call the wrong play. Like at that point, he just overthinks it. It's like he knows what play to call at every single down and distance, except for 3rd and 3 or less. Like he's going to try to take that shot to McCole Hardman. Like that was a terrible play call. Like there was no reason for that. And then if you're going to be one of the most creative play callers in the world, then go for it on 4th down. You got the best quarterback in the world. You're supposed to be one of the best play callers in the world. Put the ball in the hands of the guy who's going to win you the game, which is Patrick Mahomes. I would take my chances with the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands to make a play over trusting the defense to get a stop every single day of the week. Like, I mean, you have Mahomes for a reason. Like, there's like, I would go for it on fourth down so much more often than the Chiefs do.
Yeah, it's you have Patrick Mahomes. It makes all the sense in the world. You have the ultimate game-changing player who has proved over and over again that he can make miraculous things happen even when the play breaks down. And you leave things on the table when you choose not to attack it that way. And that's something Andy Reid struggled with his entire career. He's never been an overly aggressive coach when it comes to that stuff. And so it's not going to change anytime soon. I was annoyed by it, but it's something you just have to live with because that's who Andy is as a play caller and as a head coach at this point. So he's not going to change, not for any of us analytics nerds out there. Like we just know who Andy Reid is at this point. But again, Kansas City Chiefs win 30-29, improved to 4-1 on the regular season. Head into next week against a massive game against the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen and co coming to Kansas City. Looked really good this weekend themselves. So it's going to be a massive game at Arrowhead Stadium. If you're listening on the podcast page, please make sure you stick around after the show. We'll have all the post-game press conferences for you. You can follow Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magana. You can follow our guy Kramer at Kramer Talks. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. Make sure you're locked into the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network tomorrow morning for a new edition of the Arrowhead Drive. We'll talk to you guys.